Hey Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Really pleased to be here.
Hey, let's talk about burnout breaking points. You describe a defining moment you're in a server room where you realize your leadership system was broken. Can you explain to us what happened?
Yeah, it's probably a story that many recognize. I was a newly promoted GM. I'd been in my role for about 2.5 years, and I was making all the mistakes. I call it justification. And justification looks like this. I'll just work a little bit late tonight. I'll just open my laptop on the weekend. I'll just skip the gym because I'm really busy. I'll
Mm,
just say no to that social event because I've got a few things to finish off. I'll just get takeaway on the way home because I'm a little bit busy to cook or I'm short on time. I'll just have a glass of wine. I'll just finish the bottle. I'll
mm,
just wake up in the morning and take some extra caffeine. And this justification creeps up on you over a period of time. But when it hits, it's quite scary because you're kind of like the rubber ducky in the bath, right? Rubber ducky when you pull the plug out the bath and you get the little whirlpool effect. Um, Rubber ducky can swim out of that whirlpool initially because the water's going slowly and the suction's not too much. But when you get to the end, rubber ducky's sucked down into the little whirlpool because the system is overwhelming. And we kind of talk about burnout as this uh, point where your ability to deliver is smaller than your accountability for delivery. And so you've got the situation where the job is more complex than ever before. The number of priorities you've got coming at you is higher than ever before. The complexity is higher. There's so many things you have to think about as you move up through a business that the working harder and longer solution, which we've all been taught and trained over the 30 odd years up until now, um, suddenly isn't the tool of choice. It doesn't work anymore. But we think it does. So much like myself, I was you know, this GM who firmly believed in justification, who
mm.
firmly believed in the working harder and longer strategy. And if there was a bigger obstacle or bigger rock to move, then I worked harder. Weekends, evenings, whatever it was. And I just remember sitting on the edge of a bed, waking up one morning hungover because I'd had a couple of bottles of wine the night before, head in my hands, thinking, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I've got any more in me. I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to kill somebody else.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and that point of realization of I've made a mistake here. The system hasn't helped. The environment I was in hasn't helped. My manager, I was at my third manager, I think, by this point in 2 years. So my executive leadership team was dysfunctional as well.
Mm,
But I did it to myself, right? And I ended up in this situation where I didn't know, I couldn't find my way out. And so I just pushed harder and eroded even more of my energy reserves to the point where there was just nothing left. And I had to step out of the system. I had to try and recover myself in order to be able to carry on with life. And it was a really tough, it was a really tough couple of years to go through. Initially, for 6 months of being essentially ineffective, dysfunctional, and then slowly finding my way back and silver lining to a very great cloud. Uh, it's become a 10-year passion project that has turned into a business. But it was a rough start to get into it.
mhm. So let's transition and talk about leadership systems as a constraint. You
Mm.
argue that leaders, I'm air quote, not the process, is often the true bottleneck. What did you mean by that?
So we had a phenomenon in the sort of hierarchy of leadership capability that we work in called the village fisherman. And the village fisherman is often the village hero because they wake up before everybody else is awake. They're often up before sunrise. They're out on the water, no matter the weather, battling the elements with the intention of bringing in fish for the village. And
Right.
as long as they bring back fish every day, the village eats and the village is happy. The moment where they don't bring back fish, then the village starves, then the village is unhappy. And it's a type of leadership style that we see in more than 50% of leaders, actually, especially in the operations space, because you grow up in the operations world being really good at getting stuff done, being the one who, when there's an emergency, when there's a fire, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're tearing your shirt open to expose your big S on your chest, and you're diving in to fix it, and you get recognized for that. You're the village fisherman. You're the hero. You're the one that saves the day. And unfortunately, the village when you become a village fisherman in a larger environment. You're in a GM role or a head of role, or starting to step up into the senior leadership roles. It's too many people to feed with just your ability. You've got to get some junior fishermen out on the water with you, and ideally, you train some fishermen to do the fishing for you, so you can stay home and direct the fleet. So you move into more of a sort of commodore role or a supervisory role versus the busy one who's up before dawn. And so many leaders can't make this transition. Their sense of self-worth, their ego tells them, and if I don't do it, it won't get done properly. I can't trust anybody else with this. If I give it to somebody, I'll only end up doing it myself afterwards. So I may as well just do it now. I don't have time to train people on this, so I'll just get it done. This is a big no, this is high stakes. I'll just do it. And every time we do this, again, back to justification, I'll just do it. Every time we do this, we become the bottleneck. Because what happens over time is you might have somebody who's really smart, really engaged, really intelligent and capable, who wants to do it. But every time the stakes are high, you take it off them. Every time it really matters, you take it away. Every time there's an opportunity for them to graze their knees and learn to get there, they don't get it because you take it back. And so what they do is one of two things. They either go, this isn't the job for me, because my boss always takes over, so I'll go somewhere else. Or they go, well, do you know what? It doesn't matter how hard I try because my boss is going to do it anyway. So I'll just do less, and I'll just do less, and I'll just do less. And so their 100% commitment becomes 90, 80, 70. And finally, you're the one checking the reports at 6 in the morning, because they've only done 80% of it. And they know that that's good enough because you're going to check it anyway. So why bother to try and get it any better? And so we create, unknowingly and ignorantly create this environment of us being the bottleneck, us being at the center of all the decisions, us making sure that we're across every project, every machine, every number, every metric. And that's great when you're a manager. When you're stepping up into a more senior leadership role and managing managers, that's not the approach to take because it doesn't work. And you actually slow down your operation, you slow down the people in the operation, and you constrain performance.
Mhm. So why do many continuous improvement initiatives unintentionally increase burnout, with leadership and also the teams?
Yeah, this is such a great question. Continuous improvement. Let's all just do more with less. That's continuous improvement, in a nutshell. If we look at Lean, Six Sigma, Toyota Production System, they're all about how do we strip out waste, do with less. How do we do more with less? And that is, in the early stages of organizational development. That's a great idea because you're looking for wastage. You're looking for things that are low hanging fruit. We've been doing that for 35 years. Organizations have been continuous improvement id to death.
Right.
And there's only so many layers of management you can strip out, so many efficiencies you can put in when you really got to actually look at the system that people are operating in. And unfortunately, because of this, I believe there's been a lack of leadership development, effective leadership development for the last 20-ish or so years. And we know this through the amount of investment versus the ROI of leadership development, the engagement statistics globally, the trust in leader statistics globally. So we know that we're training leaders, but they're not becoming great leaders.
Right.
So the ability, the knowledge, the skills, the experience of those leaders to make harder choices than let's just cut some heads. Let's just try and be continuous improvement focused. Let's just try and do more with less. That's easy stuff because it's process. When you talk about how do we shift people's beliefs? How do we change culture? How do we re-engage a workforce? They're what we call soft skills. Josh Bersin calls them power skills because they're really hard compared to let's take out a layer of management because it looks good on the balance sheet this quarter or this year versus let's really commit to a 2 to 3 year culture journey. Let's really work on a coaching culture that enables managers to unlock performance in their people by uncovering where the friction points are, which is where we work, right? This is we work on people are swimming through treacle in your organization. You can't continuous improvement your way out of treacle. You've got to find a different way of swimming. You've got to change the liquid. You've got to change the environment. And that's hard. So continuous improvement for me it is a great methodology. I'm qualified in it myself, so I know about it. But I just see it being the inverted commas easier option than dealing with the real problem, which is leadership.
Mhm. So, what are dependency loops and decision bottlenecks?
In insofar as operations and organizations, or can you rephrase the question for me?
Yeah. So there's a thing they call dependency loops and then decision bottlenecks. So I'm trying to figure out within operations, how are they interdependent?
Yeah, I mean, so if you have, let's paint a scenario. Um, Oftentimes, you as a leader, you believe that you have to be the one who makes all the final decisions. You're the one who has to answer all the questions. You're the one who has to sign everything off. You're the one who has to check everything before we can go. You've immediately created yourself as a bottleneck. um, People are, and it's kind of going back to where we spoke about previously. You create a dependency of people can't make a decision without you because you've decided that you have to be the one that makes a decision. People then elect not to make decisions without you because you're only going to make a decision anyway. So
Right,
we've got
right.
another dependency loop, which is I'm not interested, and their then discretionary effort goes down. But also, it means you've got to be there all the time to make decisions. I worked with a manufacturing business where the leader hadn't had a day off in 6 years
Mm,
because even when he was on holiday, he'd be on the phone trying to deal with emergencies, organize things because the business was entirely dependent on him. He had to sign everything off. And so we put into place some very simple solutions, giving people delegated authority for a certain amount of discretionary spend, using a technique called "What do you suggest?" where people come with a "What have you tried?" and "What do they suggest we can do next?" So he's not having to think. We put in delegated authority. Sorry, what's the word? Delegated cover. So when I'm away, Lanier's in charge. So go to him. Um, Within 6 months of working with him, he took a 4 week holiday overseas. For the first time in 6 years, he didn't answer the phone for 2 of those 4 weeks. He just actually took a break and recovered. He actually got to hang out with his family versus have been pulled away from the pool to go and deal with some emergency.
right.
Because we'd broken this dependency on him as the bottleneck, the linchpin, the conduit that everything had to go through, and everything had to be decided by him. And it's a very common situation. If you look at the leaders who are probably the worst victims of this, they're the leaders who care the most. They're the leaders who are most committed to the success of their business. They're often founders or they've built the business up over a period of time. They've been there a long time because they love the business. They're passionate about it. And they're in everything. And everybody knows that they know the answer. So everybody comes to them and they've probably got something like an open door policy, or they like to walk the floor, checking in with everybody and making sure they're okay. And they never get any work done because they're so busy solving everybody else's problems, who are dependent on this one amazing leader, that the leader can't actually deliver and isn't in a position to step up or step away and do their own things. So if that sounds like you, there's some techniques you can use that will enable you to solve it. But you just got to be willing to realize that you being that bottleneck is actually slowing down your business. It's career limiting for you, and it's probably burning you out over a period of time. You're probably exhausted all the time.
Right, right. So let's talk about simplify to amplify. What's this methodology?
So simplify to amplify came out of a couple of areas. I grew up in a boarding school environment, and one of the things we had to do in boarding school was army cadets, which is kind of like scouts ROTC.
Right,
That's
right.
probably the simplest explanation. And then I joined the military after university, and so my first sort of job out of university was Gulf War II, in Iraq, in Basra, doing logistic resupply. And one of the things I noticed during the course of military training and then training other soldiers and officers during the course of my military career, um, was that simplicity was essential in the heat of battle. When the bullets are flying and the bombs are exploding, there is no mental headspace for really complex stuff. You need something you can remember that's been repetition led, but when you're in the moment, autopilot kicks in and you do the right thing.
Right.
And so this simplicity was key. And when I got into the corporate world and then later the consulting world, one of the things I realized that HR quite frequently do and consultants quite frequently do is massively overcomplicate everything. Because if it's a mysterious black art, you can charge lots of money for it. If it's a mysterious black art, you must be a specialist. And I went the opposite way. I said, well, most of the people that I deal with are in battle every day, in their own environments. They're not necessarily bombs and bullets flying, but there's heavy machines rolling around, and there's big decisions to be made, and there's complex priorities to be dealt with, and they are making decisions in the heat of the moment all the time,
Mhm.
and that can be really challenging. So we need something that's simple, not those 20 steps that they've got to remember. We need the ABC 1, 2, 3 version of leadership. So what I created essentially was a series of playbooks for overcoming what we call friction points. A friction point would be where do I decide to put my time and energy when everything seems urgent and important, or how do I get my team to do what I want them to do because I keep telling them and they don't,
Mm.
or I'm so busy right now and I can't make space for my important work. So what do I do? So we've created a series of playbooks, and the intention of the playbook is to allow them a thinking process that's very, very simple, that they can work through in less than 5 minutes, that will give them a reasonable answer to move forward. So they're not paralyzed. And in the heat of the battle, they can do this in a notebook in 2 seconds, or they can have a picture of the playbook on their phone, or they can access it through our app. The key being here, though, the methodology is chunked down into three pieces. First of all, C. So simplified to amplify, first section is C, which is all about how do I work out what's important and where the real issues are versus what I'm seeing. And we're often sort of asking ourselves, what's really going on here versus what I'm seeing? I've got to dig a little bit deeper. So I need to see the problem and see what's not the biggest problems, acknowledging some fires are on fire now and they just need to keep burning because there's bigger fires to deal with.
Right.
So we've got to accept that. Second one is solve. So which playbook do I need to solve this? And then the third piece is scale, which is how do I move from solving all of these myself to enabling other people to solve, like a pebble in the pond. I'm the ripple effect. I
Right.
know these playbooks and I can start sharing these playbooks with the managers that work for me because they're really simple. I can teach them in a morning coffee meeting in 15 minutes and get everybody doing them. And then all of a sudden there's a ripple effect across the business of this new frictionless behavior. And that's what we're really doing here. For me, good leadership is not about working harder, doing more things. It's stripping back to the things that are going to make the biggest difference with the least effort. It's almost like you want to move from becoming the piston in an organization to becoming uh, the oil in the engine. You're there to grease the wheels of the engine, the machine that's working around you, and not be the one who's putting all the effort in. And so these playbooks are designed to initially get you doing it, teach your team to do it, and scale the simplify to amplify methodology across an organization.
Mhm. So let's talk a little about building autonomous teams. Can you tell us about the ways of working, WOA framework?
Yeah, so ways of working is essentially a high performing teams framework that we take people through using the simplify to amplify methodology. So lots of terms here, but essentially it's how we build high performing teams versus how we build individuals or groups of managers. And the core pieces that we really want to work on are clarity, priorities, decisions, impact, and value. So very, very simple. We want people who in your organization to go, what is it that I've got to do versus all the other things I've got to do? What's the important stuff? Why is that important? What's my bit in contributing that? How can I choose the way through this problem or thing that you want me to do that's going to be the most effective? And will that lead to creating value for this business? And if not, what can I alternatively do that's going to create more value? Or if I've got lots of things to do, which is going to create the most value? And so we just take teams through this over the course of 3 to 6 months, where we have the same playbooks that we use in all of our programs. All of the programs that we offer are customizable, but they're all built around this same methodology of playbook and friction identification. And we help them understand their role in the business, what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and what the best way of them achieving that is, and getting them talking. So often you talk about autonomous teams. Most teams are made up of a series of champions. They're great individuals, awesome performers who are working really hard in isolation. The
Right.
best teams lean on each other, can influence each other, can leverage each other, can communicate with each other. And so all we're doing is unlocking that friction that sits in the business. And the I'm in operations and you're in IT, so you must be the bad team and we're the good team in operations. And IT are sitting there going, "Oh, in operations, you guys are just messing everything up for us and making life really hard for us."
Right.
We want to take away all of that noise. That's friction, right? So we want to take that friction away by getting these people to meet each other and talk about their common challenges and their common ground and the value that they're both pursuing together, common interests. It's more than training. It's rewiring the operating system of the business through performance and friction removal.
hmm Let's talk about practical application for operations. What specific steps can a plant manager or plant managers or operation leaders implement this week?
This week, yeah, great question. So there's probably three things that I'd be doing this week. Number one is in your day, in your week, identify two minimum 20-minute, ideally 40-minute slots where you are not in your office. Leave your laptop behind, leave your phone behind, and be somewhere else. Often I say, go find a cafe, go find a local co-working space, go find a bar, restaurant, something that's near your workplace that you can just go out to, take a notebook and pen. And when you're in that space, just for 20 minutes, write down what's the most important thing for me to deliver this week, and what's the most important thing for me to deliver next week. And when you come back to the office space, focus on that as soon as you can. We ran this with a very large American retail business where we were talking to their uh, transitioning executives. So these are people who are taking over kind of 3.5 to 5,000 people businesses. So very complex jobs, very big jobs. And we challenged them with this. And we said, essentially, take 20 to 40 minutes with a notepad and pen, go do these things as we've asked you to do, and let's report back in. We got kind of three responses from the group. The first one was like, okay, I'll try this. It sounds like hard work because I'm really busy all the time, but I'm going to give it a go. Second group said, not sure how I'm going to do this, but I'll try. Third group said, I'm way too busy. There's no way that's going to get into my week. I'm so busy all the time. And we tracked the performance of these execs over the course of 6 months. And when we came to the 3 month point, Group C, the ones who were way too busy for this, many of them hadn't made it through the transition. They just couldn't cope with the workload. They couldn't cope with all the things that were coming at them, and they burned out, or they left, or they were moved on. Group B had kind of polarized themselves. They'd either gone, yes, I'm in, or yes, I'm out. So Group B wasn't as good. Group A consistently were statistically better at performing, higher engaged, better cholesterol and stress hormone stats, better business results, because they were taking the time, 20 minutes, taking 20 minutes to go, what's the most important thing for me to be working on? What's going to drive the greatest business value? So if I give you one tip, it would absolutely be that. So be less available for your team. You have to not be open door policy available for everybody's questions all the time. And we give that to every single leader. The second one is probably go to my website actually and take the Am I the Bottleneck assessment. It's free. It takes 5 minutes. And you can get to it at jblhighperformance.com/assessments. And then it's the one that says, Am I the Bottleneck? It will give you a good insight. Are you the village fisherman? Are you the bottleneck? Are you the one who is the ripple effect, or are you somewhere in between? And once you've got that, that's powerful knowledge, right? Because oh, here's where I'm starting from.
Right.
It'll also give you a whole heap of coaching tips that are going to help you move to create some tight space for yourself, to create some time for yourself, and to be able to do a better job. So maybe one day soon you can step up into your boss's job if that's what you want, or you can move into a bigger role if that's what you want, because you're operating more strategically. And that's what we really want for the people out there.
hmm So let's talk about the productivity myth. what should leaders abandon?
Working harder and longer, thinking it's going to get better results.
Mm. So, what leadership habit creates the biggest impact?
Um, Same again, actually. Not, without wanting to sound repetitive, not working harder and longer creates the biggest results. Really focusing on, and we call it the game of 1%, but it's what's the smallest thing I can do that's going to create the biggest impact. And it's very interesting, when you're a manager in an operation, it's kind of a badge of honor to be really busy checking things off lists. And if you can smash through 20 things on your checklist in a day, you're a hero. You've done great. When you start to move up through an organization, and I'm not talking about like exec roles, I'm talking manager, senior manager, GM, head of that kind of layer. When you start to move into those roles, the job is about thinking. So if you're running around doing lots of stuff, you're not thinking, which means you're missing opportunities for the highest value, lowest effort activities. It means you're going to be, it's kind of like that when you're in a car and the car's going down the freeway. When you look out the side window, the world is whizzing by. When you look out the windscreen, you get more perspective. So we need to stop us being in the looking out the side window view of leadership and start looking out the front and going, well, what's coming? What's coming at me that I need to think about and make a decision on? Not, oh my God, another thing, another thing, another thing, another thing, another thing, which is what happens to so many leaders. They just become very reactive because they're in that kind of delivery mentality. So your job, and this is probably the hardest transition you will ever make in your career, because nobody really teaches it. There's very few people that doing what we do. Um, to go, I need to stop being busy so I can be effective. Um, and I need to take some time out, 20 minutes to think, so I can be more impactful. That's a really uncomfortable space to sit. And people like you and I are here to support you. But that's probably the single biggest challenge that I think leaders face in this environment.
Mhm. Well, Jimmy, we end every episode with a question, then we'll close on your answer. So, if you could leave leaders with one principle for sustainable high performance, what would that be?
Um, all of the above. The probably the last sort of principle is what we call the 80% list. Um, write down on a piece of paper what it is that happens to you when you start to go over 80% workload. What changes? Do you become shorter? You lose sleep? You drink more? You skip exercise? You start justifying? Um, and then write down, what do you do to recover that? And every morning, check your 80% list. How many of those things are you ticking off? And if you get to more than two or three of the things on your 80% list, activate your recovery list and do it immediately. And by doing that, you'll make sure you're operating at 80%. When you're operating at 80%, that's the looking out the windscreen view. That's the not being overwhelmed, overrun, and reactive. And that is probably one of the sort of core belief shifts that we want leaders to go on is, how do I maintain 80%? Why? 80% isn't spiking cortisol and adrenaline. 80% gives you time to think. 80% means when something really emergency happens, you've got some capacity to pick it up and deal with it. 80% means it's a sustainable performance. You're not going to risk sickness, long-term health implications, and your sense of humor getting there, because 80% is sustainable.
Mm, powerful. Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for being part of the show. Uh, I'm sure my listeners will have some comments, so I'll definitely pass those over to you. But again, thank you again, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
You're most welcome. Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat.
Take care now.
Thank you to our sponsors for this episode, BMC Software, LinkedIn Premium, and Fundrise VCX. We also want to thank our executive producer. For more resources, visit the Karas Innovations website or subscribe to our YouTube channel. High performance is about the sustainable management of capacity. By focusing on a system that removes unnecessary complexity, you ensure that your leadership creates more value with less individual strain.